Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to IADC's third Meet the Expert webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be, depending on where you are in the world. We're happy to have you with us. We've already had two previous webinars about topics, survey and site investigations, and the second one was about the management of financial risk. Today, we are going to focus on sustainability and dredging. We know that this is one of IADC's spearheads in policy, and we are giving a real tribute to IADC's worldwide vocation, because our two experts will be one from Rotterdam in the Netherlands. The other one is from a tiny village not far from Paris in France. We have our crew, and IADC's Ria van Leeuwen in Amsterdam, and I myself am moderating this event from Taipei, Taiwan in East Asia. So truly a global effort for a global industry. Let me proudly introduce to you our two experts you are going to meet in today's webinar about sustainability in the dredging industry. They are Maarten Meeder. He is the regional manager for Africa of Oord, and Joffrey Cary. He is the project manager of the project we are going to zoom in on today. Gentlemen, lovely to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome to you.
Yes. We're going to zoom in shortly on a project you both worked on, which is the Saly Coastal Protection Project in Senegal, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, you were both involved in that, and I'm sure that this was not an ordinary project.
No, you can say so. It's a project where I'm really proud of, because it made such a positive impact on the local economy, the local population, but also it has quite some spin-off for Van Oord. You know, it was in the media for many times, and people are still talking about it. And I think we just did a marvelous job over there and really helped out. So it's a different project as the regular port maintenance or other dredging contracts. Now we really were very close to the population, and that really made this project quite special.
Yeah. So, Maarten, you mentioned pride. Joffrey, what is the main feeling with which you look back on this project?
Yeah, it's also pride. I'm also proud to have participated in this project, which really helped the local economy and the local community, as Maarten mentioned. And yeah, the other feeling I have is, this project was really rewarding in the sense that, yeah, we were working day by day with the local community, and bit by bit along the project, you could see the impacts on these people, and their smile, and they were appreciating us. And when you do harbor development, you also have a huge impact on the local economy, but you see it only after a few years. I mean, here you were installing rocks or sand, and yeah, and you could see the impact at the end of the day, and the reward at the end of the day as well.
Yeah. So do you go back there now after some time? Have you been back?
Not to the site. No, I was in Dakar last week, but when I left the airport, I saw a big signboard on the airport where they were promoting a beach soccer festival on our beach in Saly. You know, so that really struck me. You know, that was very good to see an international beach soccer festival in Saly. So yeah, perfect. What else do you want?
You're right. Before the project, it was impossible because the beach had gone.
There was no beach; it was water. You know, so some rocks to protect the hotels. They put them in place themselves. You know, or sandbags, but that was it. And only at low tide you maybe had a couple of meters of beach.
Yeah. So only an international water polo tournament could have been done there, but definitely not beach soccer.
Yeah, snorkeling.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. We're going to see more about the Saly Coastal Protection Project in a second. But before we do, let's complete the introductions. My name is Mike van der Vijver. I'll be your moderator for today. We're going to have a session which lasts an hour, more or less exactly an hour, where we will interview Maarten and Joffrey about the project. We will go into the implications for sustainability as a result of the work that was done there on dredging and recreating a beach which originally was there. We are going to open up your opportunity to ask questions in the chat box. So if you feel like asking a question, you want to have follow-up information on anything that we treat, feel free to send us a message through the chat box, which you will find in your screen, obviously recognizable by the usual text balloon. And then we will also conduct some polls in order to find out a bit about your knowledge of the topic. And let's start with that right away. Let me cue the first poll question for you. And we'd like to know a bit of the order of magnitude of the issue of coastal region erosion in West Africa. So our first question is about that. What is the cost implied in that, according to your view? We're going to open the poll right now, and I can see that the first people are already voting. We give you about 30 seconds to vote. Now, for those of you who have already voted, that might seem an inordinately long amount of time because you only need to choose between A, B, and C. But you must know that there is a bit of a delay in the internet connections depending on where you are in the world. So we give people a bit of leeway. So in the case of Saly, right, Maarten and Joffrey, you were saying originally there was beach and it had disappeared entirely?
Yes, actually there was no beach when we arrived at the project site. Only at low tide, maybe a couple of meters where they could put some parasols, but that was it. But if you go back in time, back to, let's say 10, 15 years ago, there was, let's say 20, 30 meters of beach still there.
Right.
Yes.
And that beach...
I often heard from the local community that the national football team was training on the Saly beach before an international competition. So the beach was quite large. Yes.
Right. That you could have the full Senegalese national football team could do practice there. Right. Okay. Yeah. So a serious beach previously, which now had disappeared entirely. This is why you were called in, right? Let's have a look at the outcome of the poll question, which by now is known. We've had about 50% of people have voted answer B, so it's between $1 and $2 billion. And while 44% have voted answer C, over 3 billion. Is that the correct order of magnitude?
Yeah, actually, it's the correct answer is C. So they will go to the next round. Who voted for answer C? I was also not aware, but in 2018, the World Bank issued a report about the damage to the coastal to the West African economies related to coastal erosion, flooding, and pollution, and they estimated the loss more as 3.8 billion on an annual basis. So you can imagine the impact on the local economies of the West African countries. And that's why it's so important to do something to stop it, because otherwise it will just continue forever.
Mm-hmm. And so you already mentioned that the Senegalese football team couldn't go there for their practice, which would have brought in some money to the local economy. But what other economic activities were affected by these losses? How does that sum add up?
It's hotels. You can imagine if you have a nice brochure of a travel agency showing your hotel, the beach, and palm trees and everything, and you arrive on the site and there's nothing left. You will not go there next year. And nowadays with internet, you get all bad reviews on the internet, so the whole tourism will collapse. And that exactly happened in Saly. So after the beaches were eroding, the whole tourism in the small town came to a complete standstill. So you can imagine,
Right.
you have beach vendors, you have hotels, you have touristic shops, you have cleaners. It's all connected to each other. And if the most important part of that disappears, it will have a cascading effect on all the other parts of the economy.
Yeah.
And also,
Okay, thanks.
also the fishing industry, yeah?
Yeah.
Because without the beaches, the fishermen there are using pirogues, wooden canoe, and and if without the beach, they can't come back to the shore, so they have to stop fishing there.
They couldn't bring in their catch.
Yes, because there are no key walls or whatsoever. The only way they have to come back to the shore is to put the pirogues on the beach.
Right. Okay. Let's have a look at. Sorry.
No, yeah, but Mike,
Maarten,
that's also an aspect which is very important. When you make a design for a coastal protection project, take that into account, because I've seen designs where they just want to put a revetment on a beach, on an eroded beach, without reclaiming the beach. But if you put a rock revetment, the beach will become completely useless for the fisherman industry. They cannot put their boats anymore on the beach. They cannot repair the nets. It's a complete loss.
Okay, that would already be a really good first conclusion for today. Thanks.
Yes, it is.
And we haven't even seen the details of the project yet. So let's go there. Let's have a look at the video. A couple of minutes video, about 5-minute video on the Saly Coastal Protection Project carried out by Van Oord. Ladies and gentlemen, could we have the video, please?
The Senegalese coastal town of Saly is one of the most popular tourist attractions in West Africa. Like many other places along the west coast of Africa, Saly's coastline has been weakened, affecting fishing and tourism. This is mainly caused by erosion as a result of accelerating global climate change and human interventions.
Laissez les places avant.
Oui.
Voilà. Tu as vu.
Et maintenant, sans plage, ce n'est pas possible.
Ce n'est pas possible. Ce n'est pas possible. Tu as compris, ouais. Voilà.
Due to this erosion, the beaches of Saly have completely disappeared. This has resulted in a decline in tourism, which is the main source of income for the 20,000 inhabitants of Saly. It is a major threat to the local economy.
My name is Maarten Meeder. I'm the regional manager Africa. Already for a couple of years within Van Oord.
The World Bank is funding this coastal protection project, which will give a boost to the local economy and community.
We're here to restore the beaches of Saly, which is a coastal town in Senegal, 70 kilometers south of Dakar, popular tourist destination. As you can see, there's no beach. In the past, the beaches disappeared due to coastal erosion, which has an immediate result on the local economy. Hotels closed down, people disappeared. Real disaster for this little village. We're here to bring the beaches back to serve the local community. The project is called the Saly Coastal Protection Project. Van Oord has 150 years of experience in designing and executing coastal protection projects. Our approach is in line with the philosophy of the World Bank. We employ local people. We have about 40% of our workforce is Senegalese. We have local operators on the excavators, on the dump trucks. We have local subcontractors. We have a local rock supplier to get all the rock from the quarry to the work site. For this project, we need about 200,000 tons of rock. We're building these breakwaters offshore. We will use a hopper dredger to take the sand from an offshore borrow area and pump the sand onto the beaches with a floating pipeline.
Ce qu'on attend, c'est d'abord de redonner à Saly sa statut d'antan, c'est-à-dire une station balnéaire avec une vraie plage, ce qui va certainement faire revenir tous les touristes qui nous avaient quittés pour d'autres destinations.
Donc si on récupère des plages, les pirogues pourraient remonter doucement. Même les pirogues, maintenant, on peut les laisser dans l'eau et il n'y a plus de danger. Parce qu'il y a les roches qui arrêtent le vague. Donc les pirogues, il faut remonter, il faut les laisser dans l'eau et il faut dormir tranquille.
Plastic is a very evident problem here on the beach in Senegal because we see a lot of plastic waste washing along the beach, but also in the village there's a lot of waste. It has a huge effect on the people that live here. So as Van Oord, we have chosen to take our social responsibility in the community. We don't only pay attention to the things that we're building in the water. We are educating children about the consequences of plastic for the sea and their environment. A clean beach is very important for the image of a city, and especially if it is the way to attract tourists.
This project really makes me proud. It's nice to contribute to the living standards of a local community and create a safe coastline for future generations.
A lot of information, a lot of fascinating detail already in that video. But let's start with the beginning. How did you get involved in this?
Yeah, as regional manager working for Van Oord already for now 5-6 years, and we of course are constantly looking for new opportunities for the business for our company, for new businesses.
Yeah.
And this project was already on the horizon prior to the launch of the tender in end of 2017. So we're already looking and speaking to people and looking at the site. So we already did some pre-investigations, and then they launched the tender. So I was completely involved with the whole tender process, the tender management, and finally we managed to put my signature on the contract in August 2018. And then I handed over the project to our project manager, which is Joffrey, Cary.
Yeah. And then how long did the actual carrying out of the project take, Joffrey?
Well, I started on the project, I remember, 1st of October 2018, and I stayed there for more than 2 years until March 2021.
Okay. Was it technically very complex?
Well, technically, was not a complex project, although we had a few challenges, of course. I mean, the complexity and the main challenge was more executing this project on the beach, among the local community, among the hotels, among the tourists. So there were a lot of stakeholders on the project, and for safety, but also for good cooperation. Then the challenge was to keep all these things working together.
Yeah.
Right.
Mike, you can imagine if you have to transport more than 200,000 tons of rock with big dump trucks through a village, narrow roads, people having holiday over there, they're having their private homes, and you're making a lot of noise, a lot of dust, a lot of vibrations. Yeah, people get agitated. So it's very important to manage that in a very good way and cooperate with the people instead of fighting against them, because we needed them to execute the project actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So of course, the real choices you make in that respect are a mix of some things that you do actually when you start out the project and some things that you may need to change while you're executing it. So can you tell us a bit about what sort of choices in that respect you made at the very start of the project? And maybe tell us if anything was already foreseen in that respect in the tender.
Yeah, Joffrey, I think you will agree is that the biggest change in the beginning we made was the location of the stockpiles for the rock. And maybe, Joffrey, you can give some more information about that.
Yes, well, I think first of all, at the tender stage, a strong decision which was taken was to build the breakwaters from the sea. So we did not have our heavy machinery, and we did not have our trucks driving on the remaining beach, but so to say on the terraces of the hotels. We just built a road perpendicular to the shore, got on the first breakwater location, and from there we built the other breakwaters. So our dump trucks were driving, let's say, over the water rather than on the beaches of the hotels. And the other thing that Maarten mentioned, indeed, the tender documents were foreseeing stockpiling of the rocks in designated locations in town. So in the middle of houses, and there's a lot of dust, a lot of noise, and the other thing is that from these stockpile locations in town, we would have had to transport the rocks with our dump trucks on the small roads with a lot of kids running around, and that was very dangerous. So we took also the decision to create a stockpile of rock in the water, just to keep our activities completely separated from the local population. So we've been minimizing the impacts.
Yeah. So this wasn't in the original tender procedure or the tender request. How did you convince the local authorities that this was a better solution? And did that play any role? It's a double question, but did that play any role in the fact that you were awarded the contract in this case?
No, so we tendered according to the specifications and requirements of the client. But when we got the contract, we really start to look into the real details. It appeared that the stockpile areas, as previously were indicated in the tender, were not available or needed to be rented. You know, the location was also not so good. And then we made the decision, listen, this is what we're going to propose to the client. We're going to put all the rock transported directly as close as possible to our working area to avoid, safety situations, environmental issues. And the client really liked that approach, and he approved the ID. So as directly from the beginning, our rocks were stockpiled on the beach. And they were quite happy with our approach. And also our slightly change in method statement, as Joffrey told, we only had one access road to the breakwaters, and all the trucks were driving, on these detached breakwaters in the water instead of having multiple roads to the breakwaters and driving up and down on the beach. That we really wanted to skip because of noise and dust and other griefs to the local people.
So your motivation was a mix of operational issues, but definitely also of issues related to sustainability. Yes,
definitely.
Yeah. And I hear you say things like safety, kids running along the road. I hear you saying things related to noise pollution, to dust. Those would be purely based on sustainability criteria.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
We wanted to execute our project, at a certain pace, but without having a huge impact on the local community. And so we really tried to separate that.
Yeah. Any other changes that you made once you got into the project, that you changed the specs, not for so much for operational reasons, but in line with our topic for today, for reasons related to sustainability?
There was not much room to improve. One of an example where we can improve on sustainability is, for example, the location of a borrow area. Now we had to sail 25 kilometers to the borrow area at quite a deep area. We do know we can get the sand closer by, still within a good distance from the coastline. But you can imagine if I can halve my sailing time, I really save on fuel, and fuel is one of the biggest consumables on a project like this. And and if the impact of a borrow area nearby is same as one far away, why not investigate in a borrow area nearby?
And how come that you didn't have that opportunity this time?
Because it was already investigated and part of the environmental impact assessment of the client. So there was no possibility to change the location of the borrow area.
Right, right. I see. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Let's see if there's any questions from the audience. For this, I need to check the chat box. And yeah, I think there's an interesting question here from David, who we have no further identification of. But anyway, David, thanks for your question. And the question is, what were the factors that led to the erosion of the beaches in the first place? So where does this originate, the whole issue with the $3.8 billion cost? Where does it come from, that issue?
Yeah, what we see in West Africa, there's a very strong sand transport along the coastline from west to east. So you can imagine if you build something perpendicular to the coast, like a port with a big breakwater, it will catch all the sand on the west side, but the sand will not be transported to the east side. So you will see a huge decrease of coastline on the east side of the project. If you look of the port, if you look at Google Earth, for example, the port of Lomé, the port of Cotonou, the port of Lagos in Nigeria, all similar problems. In Mauritania, you have the same, in the port of Nouakchott. Also, dams built in the Volta River, for example, in Ghana, is blocking the sand transport, normally brought to the ocean by the rivers. But you can imagine a dam will block part of this sand transport, bringing less sand into the ocean, having less sand to finally end up at a beach. But also you can see changes in wave patterns, in climate, where you can imagine if the wave direction will slightly turn, you can have a huge increase in erosion in some places.
Any relationship that you've been able to establish?
Interventions. Pardon?
Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead. Man-made interventions.
So man-made interventions, the construction of port breakwaters, dams, but also changes in weather patterns, creating a negative effect on the coastline in West Africa.
Any relationship that you see with rising sea levels as a result of climate change?
Oh, that will for sure have a huge impact. They also, in some areas there's almost no beach. So you can, the protection is gone. The first tree of line of palm trees is gone, which normally helps to keep the sand in place. But you can imagine an increase of 50 or 1 meter will have a devastating effect on the coastline in Africa.
Okay, yeah. So this is on the one hand a commercial opportunity, but of course this is not the kind of thing that you would like to do.
And also
stuff which is being
in these countries, 50-60% of the populations live along the coastline because the economy is there. You have the biggest ports, you have the big cities, but also the fishing economy and the tourism sector is located in the beach zone. So yeah, it's important not to lose it.
Yeah. There was a lovely quote from a gentleman in the video where he says, "If we have the beach, the fishermen can sleep tranquilly because they don't have to be afraid that their boats will get washed away by huge waves during the night."
No. And it's just happening. I've visited many places in Mauritania, in Senegal, in Ghana. And yeah, it's quite pity to see, you're standing next to a house or a hotel which is completely demolished by the ocean because the sea is just taking the coastline and there are houses built. But yeah, 1 year, 2 years later, the coastline has gone back 5 to 10 or 20 meters. So these people are in a constant fear of losing their infrastructure.
Yeah, and with their infrastructure, they're losing their source of income.
They're losing their source of income and there's nothing to go to. So yeah, they will look for other opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's move on to our second poll, because one of the important things in this kind of project is, of course, the funding. So we have a second poll question for you, ladies and gentlemen. And the poll question that we're going to launch now is about who actually provides the money for this kind of project. And in this case, of course, we're talking specifically about West Africa. So again, you've got three choices. Either is it government, is it private or commercial banks who provide the money, or are these concessional loans? Can you explain the term concessional loans?
Yes, concessional loans are actually they're also called soft loans from institutes like the World Bank, where the repayment of the loan is stretched over a very long period. We're talking about 15, 20 years, and where the interest rates are really, really low, let's say below 1%. So very attractive for countries because it doesn't give them a big, let's say, a pressure on their annual budget to repay the loan. Compared to commercial loans, which are in general needs to be repaid back in 10 years time with interest rates up to 4 or 5% depending on the type of loan and type of project.
Yeah. So let's close the poll, and here we have a slightly more diversified picture of the results. Although 58% of people voted for option C, 26% voted for option A, so from governments, and 16 voted for option B, which is private and commercial bank loans. How close to reality is this?
Yeah, it's close to reality. The majority of the projects are funded by concessional loans. The World Bank launched a platform, it's called WACA, West African Coastal Management Program, where countries can actually apply for loans, pitch their projects. It's a platform where engineers, consultants, contractors, but countries are also brought together. They allocated a quite big fund for solving this issue in West Africa. It's C is providing the concessional loans is the majority of the funding for these type of projects. And it's also difficult for Western Africa countries to get commercial loans for this type of projects because the IMF is quite strict on the amount they can borrow and the type of borrowing. So they will allow concessional loans, but they will not allow commercial loans.
I see. With that, Maarten, thank you. You've already also answered one of the further questions from our audience coming in from a person called Theo. He was asking if the Saly project is part of a broader scheme, and you just outlined that broader scheme. So thank you for that. In working there, you already mentioned several times that you were in close contact with the local population. And that, of course, is a typical issue that is relevant from the point of view of sustainability. So what can you tell us about how you managed that and whether that was managed right from the start already as a request in the tender, or is it something that you did out of your own initiative?
Well, let's say at the start we were mostly talking to authorities, environmental authorities, the governor, the prefect, the mayor of Saly, but we did not have a real link with the local community. This link with the local community developed once we started to bring equipment and rock, and that we actually had people on the beach, and it's Africa, and to approach this community, you need to identify who is the chief of the village, because within Saly you have many villages. Very small villages, and each small village has a chief, and he's the one making decisions.
Give us one name of a chief that you talk to, or more than one, if you, of course.
No, there were several ones. There was Samba, there was Mohamed, there were many of them.
What do you talk about with Samba and with Mohamed? What are your conversations about?
It was about what we were going to do, showing them drawings, informing them about the planning, informing them about the benefits for them. Informing them about employment opportunities, because that also helped a lot. That we employed a lot of young people from these small villages. That of course that was direct benefit and direct income for them, because
right.
When you tell them, okay, in 2 years from now you will get a beach and you will start fishing again, fine, but that does not give that does not bring food at the end of the day. So the fact that we could give a lot of job opportunities was an asset, yes.
So, for instance, what kind of jobs were carried out by people you hired locally?
We saw in the video dump truck operators, excavator operators, flagmen. We also found a very good guy who became foreman on the project. We also found local engineers, secretaries, drivers. I think in total we had up to 80 local staff.
Right. I think one of the vital things that needs to happen in a project like this is to create trust, to gain the trust of the local community.
Yes.
It's one thing to talk, as you said at the start, you talk to administrators like a mayor, but there is, of course, a big downside risk that if you don't gain the trust, that you won't get the local population along, and they might even start to protest against what you're doing because they don't necessarily immediately see the positive implications. How did you go about gaining that trust?
Gaining that trust was about sharing reliable information with them, consider their concerns, also committing to what we say, because one thing in Senegal is they hear a lot of projects and future developments and things like that, but which actually never happen. So that's very important to inform them. This is what we are going to do, and make sure this is going to happen. Otherwise, you quickly lose the trust. And as you mentioned, Mike, then you very quickly you get a protest, and you are in the newspapers, and that becomes a political matter, and everything gets blocked.
Right.
What we also did, 1 day per week, we organized a project open day. So there was someone to answer all the questions. We had big posters about the project, and everyone was coming to these project open days from the local community, or sometimes were tourists or hotel owners, and they were getting clear answers to their questions on a weekly basis.
Right. Were there any environmental groups locally represented that you have had to deal with?
Not really. There were groups, because of course you have few people were disturbed by the project, and there were groups of people who tried to, let's say, to take that opportunity to make a bit of money out of the project, compensation money. But we did not really have NGO fighting against us or things like that. No.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question on the starting phase, where this comes from Danes as a panel question for you guys. What did you use as assessment tools before you got it actually into the work? So when you were in the tender stage, were there any sustainability related assessment tools that you used?
No, yeah, we of course looked at the location where to get the rock. You know, you don't want to get rock at 200-300 kilometers away because it takes a lot of time and it has quite an environmental impact. So we looked for nearby quarries to take the rock from. We looked at the quality of the quarries. We don't want to enter a contract. We don't want to have a contract with a quarry who just completely neglecting all environmental rules. So we really selected a quarry which is a subcontractor for Van Oord, following the Van Oord Q8SE guidelines. So that's important. So you're trying to select your subcontractors, your local sources, to have as less as impact on the environment. So that's, if you talk about a sustainable tool, yes, that's something you take into account. And of course, you will also do a compliance check.
Okay. And any reference in either in the tender or in the execution to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs?
No, they were not mentioned, but you can clearly link the project to the sustainable goals of the United Nations. For example, this project definitely brought more prosperity in the city. This project did something for our planet. You know, it's protecting our planet. So yes, there are definitely links to the UN items.
And I think, you know, if you look at the fishing, maybe something even related to biodiversity.
For sure. You can imagine, Mike, building these breakwaters. We got signs from the fishermen that because of the breakwaters, there was much more fish, you know, nearby, because they were hiding in between the rocks. So your biodiversity increases building these rock structures. You have a temporary effect on the environment, because you are building, you have some pollution or some turbidity in the water. But once everything is constructed, the positive effect is much bigger as the temporary negative effect during the construction.
Right. So you had an initial stage where you're creating a bit of havoc, and then at some point I could imagine that you get to a kind of turning point where people are seeing that they're actually doing it. We hear about all these plans, but these guys are actually doing it. So what happened? When was that moment? When was the turning point?
Yeah, I think, Joffrey, you agree, when we were on site, and I think the first breakwater was actually almost completed. Then it started to live for the people. But I think the biggest turning point was when we started the beach reclamation works, because this project was actually executed in 2 phases. First, we did the breakwaters, and after that, we started to pump the sand on the beaches. And when we did the first 100 meters of beach, you know, it was like a miracle for most of the people. Seeing a nice golden beach instead of water.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Did they have smiles on their faces the way you have now?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes,
you know, when I visit the project, many times, and when you're walking through the village, they start to know you, and you visit the local bars, and each time the people thank you for doing this project and doing in the way we did the project, and that really is something special, I think. That's the close cooperation with this community that strikes it. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Joffrey, you were there even more.
Yeah. As soon as we pumped the beach, then the beach was used straight away. That you could see that the fishermen were bringing back their boats on the beach. You could see local entrepreneurs starting to build a small restaurant on the beach with a barbecue and a few chairs. And so what was nice to see was all these small kids of 5-6 years old who saw a beach for the first time. And in the evening, there were hundreds of kids playing football on the beach. That was first time for them, because what you have to take into account also is that they have very limited means of transport. So even if there is a beach 10 kilometers up north, they've never seen it. It's too far away. So
you can imagine, Mike. When we first came to the site, some areas really looked if they were struck by a hurricane. The hotels, no roofs, pools full of dirty water, palm trees, collapsed. And now you look at the site. You can see it on the picture. You have a golden beach. The breakwaters are protecting the beach. They're forming these nice salients, which is a typical design feature of this type of designs for coastal protection. You see people swimming, enjoying. The canoes are back on the beach. It's a 180-degree change.
Yeah. So I particularly like the image of the kids going out there and playing football in the evening. Yeah. Any of you played along, or is football not your thing?
They're too good.
Yeah. Okay. So, but let's return to a bit of a bigger picture, and let's talk about the serious stuff related to these kinds of projects. Let's get poll number 3, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm calling on you to answer our next poll question, and that is about the duration, or rather the time it requires to get these projects underway. So here's 3 time frames. How long do you think it takes in Africa to get a project like this running? Is it between 3 and 5 years, between 1 and 2 years, or less than a year? Here goes the poll. It's activated. Let's have a look at your answers there. And meanwhile, maybe you can answer a question that comes in through the chat box, which is, how long is this work lasting, and will you require to return there in the next 5, 10, or 20 years to do any further work or maintenance?
That's a very good question, because maintenance is of course important. For designing such coastal protection projects, I think it is important to minimize the maintenance, especially if you're in an area where there's not much dredging capacity available. And also budget-wise, it's very important. We think we did our own computer simulations. How is the beach going to shape after you construct the breakwaters, you pump the sand. We think it will be around 5 to 10 years before a small beach reclamation campaign is required to keep the beach in the shape as it is now. So that's right. Approximately the timeline. For the breakwaters, there's no maintenance required actually. But the beach needs some attention in the upcoming period.
How can you plan a project like this in such a way that you can make it as low maintenance as possible?
Yeah, that's designing stuff. You can make computer simulations, taking currents, taking the sand transport along the coastline into account, wave simulations, and there are quite sophisticated computer programs which actually can predict how a beach is going to behave with a certain design. So that's what we did. The design was not ours. There was a French company who made the design, but in some cases, Van Oord is designing these type of projects where we take this into account. How can we design something which is sustainable?
And that is, of course, part of being sustainable as well. That you make the design in such a way that you don't force your client, in this case, to have to contract even further concessional loans in order to keep it up.
It makes no sense to execute a project and you need to come back every year. Then it's a wrong design, in my opinion.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Meanwhile, we've got the answers to our third poll in, and I think probably not surprisingly, 86% of people have voted for a time frame of 3 to 5 years, and that is indeed what it is, Maarten, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That's what we see in Africa from the we see a problem. We go to the World Bank. We apply for a fund, and then the whole process will start with, executing investigations, procurement processes, environmental impact assessments, sociological impact assessments. international tendering, tender evaluation, permits. It's really a long process, and sometimes it's underestimated by governments. They think it can be done in 1 year or 2 years, and we as the industry want to do these things quicker to avoid losing $3.8 billion on an annual basis. But if you have to wait 3 to 5 years, it's quite far on the horizon sometimes. But the problem is there.
Is this significantly longer than anywhere else in the world, in your view?
Yeah, look, in the Netherlands, we have, we pump around 12 to 14 million cubic meters of sand on an annual basis on our beaches. The beaches are monitored on an annual basis. We have a budget allocated to it. So it's an ongoing maintenance strategy. So we indicate the weak links. When there's a weak link, we can act immediately because the money is there, the technology is there, the infrastructure is there, and the organization is there. But if it's not there and you have to start from scratch, then you're ending up with 3 to 5 years easily.
Yeah. And in fact, you're already preempting some of the advice that you would like to give at the end. So we're going to go there now. First, I'd like to ask you to tell us, for each of these webinars, ladies and gentlemen, we ask our expert guests to give us first 3 lessons that they've learned. There are 3 main lessons, and then afterwards 3 pieces of advice. So again, this time we're going to proceed like that. We have a slide with the 3 main lessons learned. So if we can bring up that slide, then I'd like any of you two who would like to talk us through these. These are your 3 main takeaways from this project. Who would like to discuss them?
Yes, I can.
Joffrey
I can
learned a lot of
something.
lessons.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I look at the first lessons mentioned on the slide, I think we discussed it a bit before, but indeed taking the local community on board to execute the project is a must for cooperation. It's also giving the benefits of the project to the local community, and as we said before, that they can quickly organize a protest if they are not properly involved, and you can get the project completely blocked.
Joffrey, on this point, with hindsight, you mentioned that you hadn't been in contact with the local population during the tender stage beforehand, but you actually got gradually into contact as you started executing and implementing. Do you believe that is the best strategy, or would you, with hindsight, would you think that it would have been better to start even earlier, or it wouldn't have made any difference?
No, it's there are positive and negative aspects to both solutions. Taking them on board too early can also make things too complicated, because then everybody wants to be really involved in the decision making. That can become out of control. So from my point of view, I would say that taking the local community on board, let's say on a very general level, saying, okay, this is a project we are going to do. Do you have specific requests for this project? Or at tender stage, this is okay. But really going into the details, that's for the execution phase.
Yeah, right. Okay, sorry, that was your first lesson. The second?
Yes. The second lessons. That's also linked to the first one. If the local community is not clearly informed and involved about the project, then you're facing resistance, long discussions, and again you get to a blockage, and that's also that's with the local community, but it's also with let's say business stakeholders along the project, and especially for Saly, I'm thinking about the hotel owners. Those guys were involved at a very early stage. And of course, you have to make sure that you execute the project without stopping the business. As we said earlier during this webinar, tourism was still ongoing while we were executing the project. So you have to find solutions to work with them. And sometimes, you know, they will ask you, okay, this weekend I have a specific event. I have my hotel is full. Can you work somewhere else? So you also have to be flexible and go to another work front. So it's a full-time cooperation communication with local stakeholders. Right.
And your third lesson relates specifically to the safety and quality standards.
Yes. Yes, because in Senegal, especially in Saly, let's say safety and quality awareness were completely inexistent. It's if you talk to a guy about safety, then maybe he will put a helmet only when he sees you approaching. But if you look down, he's wearing a helmet with flip-flops, no safety shoes. No, and of course it's also there you have to be flexible because these guys have they had a steep learning curve. They started from walking with flip-flops and very old tools and things like that. In the end of the project, they were, I would say, up to Van standards, but that was a challenge, and that required a lot of efforts to make it acceptable. And this is something you should not underestimate.
Yeah, thanks. So very clearly that requires a lot of management attention. Maarten?
Yes.
Yeah, and luckily we could finalize the project with without any serious injury on site. So that's transporting, you know, a high volume of rock, moving equipment. I think we did a great job related to safety over there.
Yes.
Great. Good to hear. And let's move on to your advice that you have for our viewers today. So our final slide are the 3 pieces of advice, and these take it a slightly more distant view, more of a bit of a helicopter view.
Correct. So yeah, I'm in the dredging business for 25 years, and in Europe, dredging and beach reclamation is quite common. But in West Africa or Africa, it's not common. So we really should transfer our knowledge to local governments, to people, to universities in West Africa, so they can come up with the solutions themselves. And be a step ahead instead of a step behind. So it's really important to share our knowledge also during project execution. Why we do this, what is the costing of it, how can we improve, but also prior. So I think we all know the Technical University of Delft, where we have an excellent education related to coastal protection. But nothing of this exists in Africa, and that I think it's a challenge to start it up in Africa. But they for sure will benefit from it in the future. And I think as industry, we should put pressure on that.
Do you see a role for IADC in that respect?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can have these kind of webinars about coastal protection in general, like where they where students can attend, and you indeed invite experts to guide them through the basics of coastal protection, for example.
Yeah. I think your second advice, which is make use as much as possible of local resources, I think we've covered that extensively.
Yeah,
so that's pretty obvious. But maybe you can just say a couple of words in closing about point 3.
indeed, it's focus on prevention instead of repairing afterwards, because the repair costs are much higher as you do it before. So now we spent up to 30 million euro to protect the coastline of Saly. That could be half of it if they started earlier. So the longer you wait, the bigger the damage, and you should have an internal organization within your government to take care of that.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're reaching the end of this third webinar in this series. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank, on behalf of everyone, Maarten and Joffrey for having been our expert guests and having given us this lovely insight into the Saly Coastal Protection Project that you took on board in Senegal. I'd like to thank Ria van Leeuwen on behalf of Iadc, and I'd like to thank the crew in Amsterdam for the flawless technical execution of this webinar. And I'd like to remind all of you with a last point, which is that Iadc will continue, of course, to offer information and insights to all the dredging community. Go to the Iadc website. As a result of ongoing uncertainties, it is a bit difficult to exactly give you the dates at this point in time. But there's one thing that I'd like to point out, which is the traditional Iadc 5-day dredging seminar, which Iadc holds regularly. It will be held as planned this year from 8 to 12 November in Delft, and again from 4 to 8 April next year in Singapore. Again, due to uncertainties which we all know about, these dates might change. Check out the Iadc webinar for further information. Thank you very much for having been our guest today for this webinar, and of course it'll remain online for remote viewing for those of you who would like to recommend this session to anybody else. That's it for today. Hope to see you soon for our fourth webinar with yet another expert to meet. Ladies and gentlemen, goodbye for today.